There is a sculpture in the sand dunes at Bunker Bay, directly in line with the surf break where my son was killed. We placed the sculpture there, not as a reminder of Kyle's death, but as a reminder to appreciate the beauty of the bay, the joy of surfing, and the need to protect everything in nature that we sometimes take for granted. It has been a place of peace and comfort for me. Now, as I sit and contemplate at this special place, I can clearly see the drumline buoys directly offshore, and it disturbs me greatly. The sculpture and the drumline. It's a metaphor for the two opposing forces that represent the divide we now find ourselves in, with the memories of our loved ones caught in between. The three most common questions I have been asked during this debate are: what would Kyle think of all this? Why don't I like the drumline policy? And why have I spoken out against this policy? What would Kyle think about the drumlines? I can never properly answer this question. It is just one of many conversations I wish I could have with my son, but never will. All that I can say for certain is that I have spent many hours thinking about how I might be able to honour his unfinished life, and what I need to do to stay true to my own beliefs so that I do not lose myself completely during this journey. Through my work and studies, I have come to understand the nature of risk assessment and mitigation. And my understanding is that when you are trying to prevent a potentially fatal outcome, you do everything possible not to introduce new risks into the process. This is paramount, even if it means you have to accept a greater cost or more planning in order to achieve a more sophisticated outcome. So when this policy was announced, my immediate and continuing response was that this was a mediocre and fundamentally flawed strategy in both concept and execution. In most instances, an issue becomes divisive if there is insufficient evidence to support a decision, the information is conflicting or poorly communicated, or the maker of the decision appears secretive and evasive about the details which were used to come to that decision. All of these things can make people uncomfortable with accepting the decision as a viable solution. There can be no doubt that we all want solutions for greater safety in the ocean, but the issue is, who do we listen to and why? For me, the answer is that we expect our experts to use best practice science to save lives in the medical context. So why should we not expect the same to save lives in an environmental context? We should not settle for less, and we should never stop asking questions to ensure that this happens. The people at the forefront of the anti-drumline cause, and many people behind the scenes, are well-educated, well-informed, ocean-loving individuals with innovative thinking. Where I see a need to be harnessing all that intellect and passion to provide a far more thoughtful approach to safety, conservation and research tourism, others choose only to dismiss or label them. People have also accused the frontline campaigners of caring more about fish than people. On behalf of the people that I have spent time with, I can absolutely vouch that this is not the case. I do not support the use of threats, violent images, or any form of intimidating protest from either side, as this only feeds the fear cycle we now find ourselves on. The issue should be about how our government makes decisions, whether they have completed the process appropriately, And did they release sufficient detail to the public? And how do we go about balancing population growth, lifestyle, safety, and species protection? But on Sunday, I knew that we had sunk as low as we can go with this debate. When I was reading the Sunday paper and was appalled to see a full-page advertisement for a current affairs program that looked like a Jaws movie poster. As time has passed, it has become more evident that the way my son died, and others, is now becoming more about entertainment value than public safety. It has also been reported that anti-culling supporters have threatened the loved ones of victims on social media. This is a despicable act which no thoughtful person would support. We experienced the insensitivity of trolls on social media when Kyle died, and I have had my share of criticism from the pro-culling side since I began speaking out. But we cannot stop the individuals on either side of the debate who choose to express their opinions inappropriately. Our only defence is to ignore it and to show no fear in response. Dramatising it only encourages this type of behaviour. So I am taking this opportunity today to ask that we move past this unhelpful divide and shift our full attention to the issue of viable and world-class solutions, and to address some fundamental questions. Because the fact is, I do not like the drumline policy because it is so far below my expectations of what we are capable of. And the information provided to date has not convinced me that it was the only option available to us. Given the backlash to the policy, it would seem indicative that there are many who also feel the same way. We all know that once you start down a path like this, it will be almost impossible to have the lines removed in the future. So give us every piece of information you have available to you so that we can make a truly informed decision. This state is blessed with an amazing marine resource that is not being fully recognised for the economic, tourism and scientific research value that it can bring to this state. So bringing together and aligning the full range of solutions instead of forcing them to compete for attention and funding has to provide better immediate outcomes. If this debate has proved nothing else, it has clearly demonstrated that we are absolutely fascinated by sharks. And my son was too. When I removed some of his personal belongings just after he died, I found a great white shark that we had collected on our travels. But to move forward, there are also some challenging questions that need to be addressed. Why kill if there are more sophisticated ways of dealing with shark hazard? How are we going to weigh up and value the viability of species against our ever-pervasive leisure activities? Sharks are not owned by one state or community. So are the opinions of residents in some communities more important than the opinions of the wider Australian community? Who gets to decide whether the pursuit of ocean activities by some is more important than protecting our ecosystems for all? If people are willing to adjust their water activities and behaviours for crocodile and stinger risks in the tropical north, why are we unwilling to do the same for shark risks along the southern WA coastline? If a person chooses to pursue activities in a known high-risk place, do they then have the right to blame the government and demand action if a fatality occurs? If one person gets pleasure from surfing and another person gets pleasure from seeing wildlife, whose activity and pleasure should take precedence and why? If we do not find a way to answer these challenging questions thoughtfully, then any attempts to bring an end to this division will ultimately fail. It is the failure to deal with these issues, along with a lack of discussion and consultation with the wider community on mitigation strategies, which has brought us to this divide in the first place. So what I am asking for, and what I believe we have the right to demand, is the opportunity for all solutions to be heard and thoughtfully considered by our elected representatives in an open and uncensored forum, and then the beginning of a dialogue to find answers for some of the fundamental divides in community attitudes and behaviours. For our part, if we can provide a safety case and a business case for greater excellence in how we deal with shark risk and how we go forward with community involvement, then I expect that our government will show respect by listening to us instead of labelling us. Finally, to the third question, and probably one of the hardest that I get asked. As a mother who has lost her child, how could I speak out against the drumlines? People will always have their own thoughts about this, but many of my most precious memories are of Kyle and I in some far-flung and remote place in Australia, sharing amazing and unexpected moments within our wild and unique environments. From the outback to the oceans, from the Gulf to the Bight, across every state and national park, we explored, interacted and learned from those environments. And we shared moments together that took our breath away. And it is one of these very special moments, etched clearly into my memory, which weighs heavily on my mind when I think about this drumline issue. And if you could bear with me, I would like to share it with you. It was a very cold and foggy morning, and Kyle and I were sitting on the banks of the Franklin River in the Franklin-Gordon Wild Rivers National Park in Tasmania. It was the most incredible feeling of solitude. And we sat in comfortable silence to watch some wildlife forage in the undergrowth. And with just the river and birds as a soundtrack. And I remember breaking the silence and leaning into Kyle and whispering to him, "It's an amazing place, isn't it?" To which he whispered back, "It's awesome, Mum." I looked at my child, completely enthralled in the moment, and I said to him, "It is awesome, Kyle, but I need you to remember that we are only able to see this because years before you were born, a group of people knew how important it was to save it, and they fought passionately to make that happen, even when people did not agree with them." That's how I feel about this issue. My sincere hope is in many years to come, a mother and her son will be on board a research tourism vessel as paying guests, kilometres out to sea from Cape Naturalist, as they bring a large great white shark alongside to tag and release it. And that child will turn to his mum with uncontained excitement and say, "That was so awesome, Mum." To be able to see such a creature in the wild, instead of only in a museum or zoo, and to think of the big picture and not just our own short time. I think that's a legacy Kyle would be proud of. That's how I believe I can honour his unfinished life. And that's what I hope we can achieve by speaking out. Thank you for listening.